The moment the phone slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor, I knew my life had just been divided into before and after. On the other end of the line, my boss was still talking, his voice now a tinny sound from the carpet. I could make out fragments, promotion, Colorado, opportunity of a lifetime. I should have been elated. This was everything I had worked toward for the past 5 years. Instead, I was frozen in place, my sister's tear-streaked face from the previous night's family dinner seared into my memory. "Emma, are you still there? We need your decision by Friday." My boss's voice jolted me back to reality. I fumbled for the phone, pressing it back to my ear, my hand trembling. "I'm here, Mark. I need some time to think about it." My voice didn't sound like my own. "Don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't come around often, especially for someone your age." At 32, I was young to be offered a position heading up an entire new branch. The marketing team I'd built from scratch had outperformed every other division in the company. Numbers don't lie, and mine told a story of dedication, late nights, and sacrificed weekends. While my friends were posting engagement photos and baby announcements on social media, I was climbing a corporate ladder that, until yesterday, had felt like the most important thing in my life. After hanging up, I sank onto my couch, the silence of my apartment suddenly oppressive. The modern furnishings I'd once been so proud of now seemed cold and impersonal. I glanced at the framed photo on my coffee table, my family at last year's Thanksgiving. Mom and Dad beaming proudly, Julia radiant in her pregnancy glow, her husband, Tom with his arm protectively around her shoulders, and me, slightly to the side, smile not quite reaching my eyes. Julia had always been the golden child, 2 years younger than me, but somehow always a step ahead in life's milestones. She married her college sweetheart at 25, bought a charming house in the suburbs, and now, at 30, had given birth to my nephew Ethan. The perfect life, according to our parents' playbook. I'd chosen a different path. After college, I threw myself into my career, determined to prove that success didn't have to mean a white picket fence and 2.5 kids. And I had succeeded, until last night's dinner, when Julia had broken down at the table, confessing through sobs that she couldn't handle motherhood, that something was wrong with her, that she couldn't even look at her baby without feeling like a failure. The diagnosis had come a week ago. Severe postpartum depression. As Julia wept in our mother's arms, I had watched my father's face crumple with worry, watched Tom struggle to maintain his composure as he explained that Julia's therapist had recommended intensive treatment, possibly even hospitalization. "We can't afford for Julia to stop working," Tom had said, his voice tight with stress. "My salary alone won't cover the mortgage and the medical bills, and someone needs to take care of Ethan." The unspoken question had hung in the air, all eyes, eventually turning to me. The unmarried daughter, the one without dependents, the one with the flexible job and the savings account. Now, staring at my phone, I felt the weight of choice pressing down on me. Colorado meant a 6-figure salary, a team of my own, and the recognition I'd spent years working toward. Staying meant what? Putting my life on hold indefinitely to help pick up the pieces of my sister's broken dreams? I pulled up my email and stared at the official offer letter, cursor hovering over the accept button. My finger trembled. I thought of Julia's vacant eyes, of tiny Ethan who needed someone stable in his life. I thought of my parents, aging and ill-equipped to handle an infant and a daughter in crisis. I closed the email without responding. 3 days later, I sat across from Mark in his corner office, the city skyline a glittering backdrop to the conversation that would alter my career trajectory. A leave of absence? He looked genuinely confused. "Emma, this isn't just any position. This is a branch directorship. If you walk away now, there's no guarantee it will be waiting for you when you come back." "I understand that." My voice was steadier than I expected. "My sister is ill. She needs me." It's a family emergency. How long are we talking about here? A few weeks? I swallowed hard. The doctors are saying 6 months to a year for full recovery. Mark leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from confusion to resignation. I can hold your current position for 3 months, Emma. After that, I'll have to hire a replacement. As for Colorado, he shook his head. That train is leaving the station. I need someone who can relocate next month. I understand, I repeated, though my heart was splintering. 5 years of 14-hour days, of missed holidays and canceled dates, all culminating in this moment of sacrifice that no one in my family would ever fully comprehend. As I packed up my desk that afternoon, my colleague Rachel leaned against the doorframe of my office. You're really doing this? For your sister? The disbelief in her voice reflected my own inner turmoil. She'd do the same for me, I said automatically, though I wasn't entirely convinced. Would Julia give up her perfect life to bail me out? I wanted to believe she would, but doubt niggled at the edges of my certainty. Well, if anyone deserves a break, it's you. Rachel helped me pack the last of my awards into a cardboard box. Just don't disappear completely, okay? Some of us actually like having you around. I promised to stay in touch, but as I drove to my parents' house that evening, my phone already buzzing with messages about transition plans and handover documents, I had a sinking feeling that my old life was receding faster than I had anticipated. Mom answered the door, relief washing over her tired face when she saw me. Oh, Emma, thank goodness you're here. Julia hasn't gotten out of bed all day, and Ethan's been fussing since noon. I stepped into the house, the sound of a wailing infant immediately assaulting my ears. Dad was pacing the living room, bouncing a red-faced Ethan who looked as exhausted as his grandfather. Here, let me, I said, setting down my bags and reaching for my nephew. Dad handed him over gratefully, his shoulders sagging with relief. I don't know how you do it, he said, as Ethan's cries immediately began to soften in my arms. He always quiets down for you. Where's Tom? I asked, noticing his absence. At work. He's been picking up extra shifts to cover the medical bills. Mom's voice was tight with disapproval. I know they need the money, but Julia needs him here. I nodded, swaying gently with Ethan. His tiny fingers curled around my thumb, his eyes, so like Julia's, staring up at me with a trust that made my chest ache. Whatever regrets I had about Colorado faded in that moment. This little person needed me. My sister needed me. I turned down the promotion, I said quietly. I've taken a leave of absence instead. I'm here now. I'll help with Ethan, and I can contribute to Julia's medical expenses. The relief on my parents' faces was instantaneous and overwhelming. Mom burst into tears, enveloping me in a hug that squished Ethan between us, causing him to let out an indignant squawk. You've always been our rock, Emma, Dad said, his voice rough with emotion. I don't know what this family would do without you. In that moment, basking in their gratitude and approval, I felt a glimmer of something I'd been chasing my entire career. The sense that I'd made the right choice, that I was exactly where I was meant to be. It wouldn't be until much later that I would recognize that feeling for what it truly was, a carefully constructed illusion that would ultimately shatter and cut me deeper than I could have imagined. The first few weeks of my new reality were a blur of sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and whispered consultations with Julia's doctors. I moved into my parents' guest room, transforming it into a makeshift nursery with a portable crib beside my bed. Tom was rarely home, working double shifts at the hospital where he was a nurse, his face growing more haggard each time I saw him. Julia remained mostly in her bedroom, either sleeping or staring vacantly at the wall. On her good days, she would sit in the living room holding Ethan awkwardly while I prepared bottles or did laundry. On her bad days, she couldn't bear to look at him, dissolving into tears whenever he cried. It's like he knows I'm a terrible mother, she whispered one evening as I took him from her trembling arms. He cries more with me than with anyone else. That's not true, I assured her, though I had noticed Ethan's distress whenever Julia held him. He's just sensitive to your anxiety. Once you're feeling better, you'll find your rhythm with him. She nodded, but her eyes remained distant, fixed on some point beyond me. Sometimes I caught her watching me with Ethan, a strange expression flickering across her face before she would look away. My parents orbited around Julia like anxious satellites, bringing her tea she wouldn't drink and food she barely touched. They spoke of her in hushed tones, as if her depression were a sleeping beast they feared waking. She was always so vivacious, Mom would say, wringing her hands. I don't recognize my own daughter anymore. I wanted to point out that I didn't recognize my own life anymore either, but I kept those thoughts to myself. Instead, I focused on establishing a routine for Ethan, on keeping the household running, on managing the mounting medical bills that appeared in the mail with alarming frequency. 1 month into my leave of absence, I received an email from Mark. The Colorado position had been filled. Reading the name of my replacement, a colleague with half my experience but twice my networking skills, felt like a punch to the gut. I shut my laptop and went to check on Ethan, who had become my anchor in the storm of my upended life. As I stood over his crib, watching his peaceful sleep, the magnitude of what I had given up washed over me. Not just the promotion, but the trajectory of my career, the confidence of my superiors, the momentum I'd spent years building. For what? For a sister who could barely look at me, for parents who had always seen me as the responsible one, but never the special one, for a brother-in-law who was conspicuously absent when the hard work of caregiving needed to be done. I wiped away tears I hadn't realized I was shedding and straightened my shoulders. This wasn't about me. It was about Ethan, innocent and deserving of stability. It was about Julia, who was battling a disease as real and debilitating as any physical ailment. It was about family, which had to mean more than any job title or corner office. That night, I drafted a budget. Between my savings and the reduced salary from my leave of absence, I could cover Julia's treatment and contribute to the household expenses for about 6 months. After that, things would get tight. I emailed Tom the spreadsheet, suggesting we meet to discuss financial plans for the longer term. His reply came at 3 a.m., terse and evasive. We'll try to find time next week. Appreciate everything you're doing. By the time my 3-month leave was halfway through, it became clear that I would not be returning to my old position. Rachel called to tell me they had hired my replacement, a bright-eyed recent MBA who had already rearranged my office and instituted a new project management system. It's not the same without you, Rachel said, her voice thick with sympathy. Everyone asks about you, but Mark doesn't like us bringing up your name. Out of sight, out of mind, I said, trying to keep the bitterness from my voice. You could always look for something else, she suggested. I know a few places hiring, but the reality was that I couldn't even manage a proper job search while caring for Ethan nearly full-time. Julia's condition seemed to plateau, not worsening, but not improving either. The doctors adjusted her medications, suggested different therapies, but the spark of my sister remained buried beneath layers of lethargy and disinterest. As I approached the end of my official leave, I made the difficult decision to resign completely. The severance package would provide a small financial cushion, but it was a Band-Aid on a hemorrhaging wound. I updated my budget spreadsheet, the numbers becoming more daunting with each revision. When I told my parents about my decision, they reacted with a mixture of relief and concern. "Are you sure about this, honey?" Mom asked, though the hope in her eyes betrayed her true feelings. "We don't want you to sacrifice your whole career." "It's just a job," I said, the lie burning my throat. "I can always find another one when Julia's better." Dad squeezed my shoulder, his eyes watery. "You're a good sister, Emma. Not everyone would do what you're doing." That night, I allowed myself a rare moment of self-pity, scrolling through social media and seeing updates from colleagues about projects I had initiated, conferences I should have been attending, a life that was continuing perfectly well without Me. Rachel had posted photos from a team happy hour, everyone smiling with drinks raised. No empty chair for me. I closed the app and checked on Ethan, who had recently started sleeping through the night, a small mercy in an otherwise challenging situation. His tiny chest rose and fell with each breath, his face peaceful in sleep a way that Julia's never was these days. "It's worth it," I whispered to him, stroking his soft cheek. "You're worth it." But as I returned to my bed, the question that had been haunting me for months resurfaced. Was I the only one making sacrifices for this family? And how long could I keep giving before there was nothing left of me at all? The answer would come, sooner than I expected, and it would shatter every assumption I had made about my family, my sister, and the choices that had led me to this breaking point. 4 months after I had given up my career to care for Ethan and support Julia, I noticed something odd. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I had taken Ethan to the park, a rare moment of respite, from the confines of my parents' house. As we sat beneath the shade of an oak tree, I scrolled idly through Instagram while Ethan napped in his stroller. A new post from an account I didn't recognize appeared in my feed. Someone had tagged Julia. Curious, I tapped on it and felt my blood freeze in my veins. There was my sister, smiling broadly at a restaurant I didn't recognize, raising a glass of wine and a toast. The caption read, "Ladies' lunch with my favorite mama. Blessed your mom's day off." The timestamp showed it had been posted 2 hours ago, when Julia was supposedly at a therapy session. I scrolled through the account, finding more photos of Julia at various outings over the past month, shopping trips, lunches, even a day at a spa. In each one, she looked vibrant, happy, nothing like the hollow-eyed woman who shuffled around my parents' house in pajamas. My hands trembled as I closed the app. There had to be an explanation. Perhaps the photos were old, posted recently, but taken before Ethan's birth. Perhaps it was part of her therapy, brief outings to reintegrate into normal life. Perhaps. But the knot in my stomach told a different story, one I wasn't ready to confront. When I returned home, Julia was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone. She looked up as I entered, her expression immediately shifting to one of exhaustion, her shoulders slumping. "How was therapy?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral as I unbuckled Ethan from his stroller. "Draining," she sighed, setting down her phone. "Dr. Levine wants me to start journaling my feelings toward Ethan, as if I have the energy for that." I nodded, watching her face for any sign of deception. Maybe it would help to get out more? Perhaps lunch with a friend occasionally? Something flickered in her eyes, alarm, quickly masked by weariness. "I can barely get out of bed most days, Emma. The idea of socializing is exhausting." "I understand," I said, though the lie tasted bitter on my tongue. "I just thought fresh air might do you good." That night, after Ethan was asleep, I did something I'd never done before. I went through Julia's purse, which she had left on the kitchen counter. Inside, I found receipts from restaurants, shopping bags, and a movie theater, all dated during times when she was supposedly at therapy or too exhausted to leave her bed. The evidence was damning, but still, I hesitated. Confronting Julia meant acknowledging a betrayal so profound it would forever alter our relationship. It meant admitting that I had sacrificed my career, my savings, my very identity on the altar of a lie. I needed more proof, something irrefutable. The next day, when Julia announced she was going to therapy, I waited until she had driven away before bundling Ethan into his car seat and following her at a distance. Instead of turning toward her therapist's office, Julia drove to a small cafe downtown where she met the same group of women from the Instagram photo. Through the cafe window, I watched my supposedly depressed sister laugh and chat animatedly, looking more alive than I had seen her in months. I took out my phone and recorded a brief video, my hands shaking with a combination of rage and heartbreak. When I returned home, my parents were in the kitchen preparing dinner, They looked up in surprise when I entered without Ethan. "Where's the baby?" Mom asked, immediately concerned. "With his mother," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm raging inside me. "I followed Julia today. She wasn't at therapy. She was having lunch with friends at La Petite Bistro." My parents exchanged a look that confirmed my worst suspicions. They knew. They had known all along. "Emma, sit down," Dad said, his tone placating. "There's a reasonable explanation." "I'm sure there is," I replied, remaining standing. "I'd love to hear how you explain these." I placed my phone on the table, displaying the photos I had pulled from Instagram and the video I had taken. "Or these." I emptied my pocket of the receipts I had found in Julia's purse. "Or the fact that her therapist's office called last week about a missed appointment, and you," I looked directly at my mother, "told them she was too ill to come in." Mom's face crumpled, but not with shame, with annoyance. "You went through her things? You followed her? Emma, that's invasion of privacy." The audacity of her response left me momentarily speechless. When I found my voice again, it was cold with fury. "I have given up everything, my job, my apartment, my savings, my life, to take care of her child because she claimed to be too depressed to function. And you're worried about her privacy?" Dad stepped forward, hands raised placatingly. "It's not what you think, Emma. Julia was depressed after Ethan was born, severely so. The diagnosis was real." "But," he sighed, shoulders slumping, "but she started improving about 2 months ago. The medication began working and she felt better. She wasn't ready to take on full responsibility for Ethan yet. So she lied, and you helped her." "We didn't see it as lying," Mom interjected. "We saw it as giving her time to fully recover. Rushing back into motherhood could trigger a relapse." I stared at them, these people who had raised me, who had taught me about honesty and responsibility, who had accepted my sacrifice without a flicker of guilt. And what about me? Did anyone consider what this was doing to my life, to my career, to my future? "You seemed happy to help," Dad said weakly. "You've always been so capable, so independent, and you're wonderful with Ethan." "That doesn't give you the right to exploit my capability," I spat. "Where's Tom in all this? Does he know his wife is out living her best life while I raise their child?" Another exchanged glance, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. "Tom moved out 2 months ago," Mom admitted. "They're taking some space from each other." The betrayal was complete. Not only had my sister faked her ongoing depression, not only had my parents enabled her deception, but they had hidden the collapse of her marriage from me as well. All while I bankrupted myself caring for a child that wasn't mine, for a sister who was using her freedom to shop and socialize while I changed diapers and warmed bottles. As the reality of their deception sank in, a cold clarity washed over me. I had been the family doormat for as long as I could remember. Reliable Emma, responsible Emma, Emma who would always pick up the slack. This time, they had gone too far. "I want everything I've spent reimbursed," I said, my voice deadly calm. "Every medical bill I've paid, every grocery trip, every baby supply. I want it all documented and repaid." "Emma, be reasonable," Dad began, but I cut him off. "I've calculated it. It's just over $47,000. I want a payment plan in writing by the end of the week." "We don't have that kind of money," Mom protested. "Then Julia can get a job instead of having ladies' lunches. Tom can pay child support. You can downsize this house that you've turned into a den of lies." My voice rose with each word, years of suppressed resentment finally breaking free. "Figure it out, because I'm done being the family ATM and unpaid nanny." At that moment, the front door opened and Julia walked in, her cheeks flushed from an afternoon of leisure. She froze when she saw us all in the kitchen, my phone displaying her duplicity on the table, the atmosphere charged with confrontation. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice immediately taking on the weary quality I now recognized as completely artificial. "The jig is up, Jules," I said coldly. "I know you've been faking, and I know they've been helping you." Something shifted in her expression, not shame or guilt, but annoyance, as if I'd interrupted an enjoyable game. "You don't understand, Emma." "You're right. I don't understand how my own sister could lie to my face for months while I destroyed my career to take care of her child. I don't understand how our parents could watch me drain my savings for a lie. I don't understand how any of you sleep at night." "It wasn't all a lie," Julia insisted, her voice rising defensively. "I was really depressed at first. I just got better faster than expected. And then, it was nice having help. Being a mother is exhausting, and you're so good with Ethan." "Stop." I held up a hand, unable to bear another word of her self-serving justification. "Just stop. Where is Ethan now?" Julia's eyes widened in alarm. "I left him with Megan. She was going to bring him home after our lunch." As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Dad went to answer it, returning moments later with a smiling blonde woman holding Ethan. "Thanks for watching him for a few hours, Em," she said cheerfully, handing him to me before I could correct her assumption. "He was an angel, as usual." After she left, I looked down at Ethan, who gurgled happily in my arms, blissfully unaware of the adult drama unfolding around him. I loved this child fiercely, had cared for him as if he were my own. But in that moment, I knew I had to save myself. "Here," I said, placing Ethan in Julia's arms. She took him awkwardly, surprised by my abruptness. "He needs a diaper change. He'll be hungry in about an hour, and he likes the blue pacifier, not the green one." "Where are you going?" Mom asked, panic creeping into her voice as I headed for the stairs. "Away from here," I replied without turning around. "I'll send for my things once I have a place to stay." In the guest room, I packed quickly, taking only essentials. As I zipped my suitcase, Julia appeared in the doorway, Ethan balanced on her hip. "You can't just leave," she said, a note of genuine fear in her voice for the first time. "I don't know how to do this without you." I looked at my sister, beautiful, selfish Julia, who had always gotten everything she wanted. "You'll figure it out. Real mothers do." "That's not fair," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "None of this has been fair, Jules." I shouldered my bag, pausing beside her on my way out. I pressed a kiss to Ethan's forehead, inhaling his baby scent one last time. "Send me the money, all of it, or I'll see you in court." As I walked out of my parents' house that evening, the weight of betrayal sat heavy on my shoulders. But underneath it was something else, something I hadn't felt in months, the lightness of possibility, of a future that was once again mine to determine. I checked into a hotel that night, using one of the few credit cards I hadn't maxed out paying for Julia's treatment. Sitting on the edge of the generic queen bed, I allowed myself to fully process the magnitude of my family's deception and my own naivety. How had I not seen it? The inconsistencies in Julia's behavior, the convenient timing of her worst days whenever there was something she didn't want to do, the way she manipulated our parents with practiced ease. Perhaps because I had wanted to believe the best of her, or perhaps because admitting the truth would mean facing how thoroughly I had been used. My phone buzzed incessantly with texts and calls from my family, ranging from angry accusations to tearful pleas for understanding. I silenced it and opened my laptop instead, pulling up job search sites and apartment listings. Starting over at 32 wasn't part of my life plan, but then again, neither was being exploited by the people who were supposed to love me most. After an hour of half-hearted scrolling, I reached for my phone and called the one person who had consistently been in my corner. "Rachel, it's Emma. I'm sorry to call so late, but I've had a situation." My voice broke as I attempted to summarize the past few hours. "Oh my God, Emma. That's horrible. Where are you now?" "Hotel off Route 7. I couldn't stay there another minute. Pack your bags. You're coming to stay with me until you figure things out. Her tone left no room for argument. And Emma, this isn't your fault. Some people will take advantage of kindness because they mistake it for weakness. Your family made that mistake with you. Rachel's guest room became my sanctuary for the next 2 weeks as I rebuilt the foundations of my life. She helped me update my resume, connected me with recruiters, and most importantly, provided the emotional support I desperately needed as I processed my family's betrayal. My parents attempted to visit once, showing up unannounced at Rachel's apartment with hollow apologies and excuses about just wanting to help Julia. Rachel, bless her, intercepted them in the lobby and sent them away with a piece of her mind intact. Julia sent a single text. I'm sorry you feel this way. We were just trying to do what was best for Ethan. I didn't dignify it with a response. The key. Hardest part wasn't the job search or finding a new apartment. It was the gnawing emptiness where my relationship with Ethan had been. I would wake up reaching for him, accustomed to his weight in my arms during middle-of-the-night feedings. I missed his smile, his smell, the way his tiny fingers would wrap around mine. He wasn't my child, but for 4 months, I had been his primary caregiver, the constant in his life. Walking away from him felt like tearing off a piece of my heart. 3. Weeks after my departure, a registered letter arrived from Tom. Inside was a cashier's check for $10,000 and a brief note. This is just the first installment. I didn't know the extent of the deception until it was too late. I'm filing for divorce and will ensure you receive the full amount you're owed. I'm sorry. Tom. The validation was bittersweet. I deposited the check immediately, using it to secure a small apartment and cover the first month's expenses while I continued my job search. Job hunting after a significant gap proved challenging. Interviews that started promisingly would cool when I explained my absence from the workforce. Family emergency could only gloss over so much, and without solid references from my previous position, I found myself starting at the bottom again. Finally accepted a position at a smaller marketing firm, a lateral move at best, with a salary significantly lower than what I had been earning before. The office was in a converted warehouse on the outskirts of town, a far cry from the gleaming skyscraper where I had once commanded respect and authority. On my first day, as I arranged family photos on my desk, carefully edited to exclude Julia, my new manager stopped by. Light traveler? She asked, nodding at my sparse decorations. Fresh start, I replied, offering a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Those can be good. She leaned against the doorframe. Your portfolio is impressive, Emma. Honestly, you're overqualified for this position. I'm just wondering why someone with your experience would take a step back. For a moment, I considered the usual vague explanation about family obligations. But something in her direct gaze prompted honesty. I made a choice to help someone who wasn't honest with me, I said, simply. It cost me professionally, but it taught me valuable lessons about boundaries and self-worth. She nodded slowly. Well, their loss is our gain. Looking forward to seeing what you bring to the team. That conversation was the first time I had framed my experience not as a devastating setback, but as a lesson learned. It wouldn't be the last. Over the next few months, I settled into my new life, smaller, quieter, but entirely mine. I decorated my apartment with pieces that reflected my taste, rather than what was expected of a rising corporate star. I joined a yoga studio, developed a friendship with the barista at the local coffee shop, started dating casually for the first time in years. My family remained at a distance, though the payments from Tom arrived regularly. Julia, I learned through social media, had moved back in with our parents, who were helping with Ethan while she found herself. The irony was not lost on me. 6 months after my abrupt departure, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. Tom stood awkwardly in the reception area, a manila envelope in his hands. Your assistant said you might have a few minutes, he said when I approached, surprise evident on my face. I led him to a small conference room, curiosity overriding my initial wariness. We had never been close, Tom and I, our relationship defined, primarily through Julia. The divorce was finalized last week, he said without preamble, sliding the envelope across the table. This is the last of what I owe you, plus interest. I opened it to find another cashier's check, this one for the remaining amount. Thank you, I said, genuinely moved by his integrity. You didn't have to do this, especially not after everything that happened. Yes, I did. He ran a hand through his hair, which had more gray than I remembered. I should have stopped it sooner. When Julia started improving, I thought it was a good thing that she was getting out more. I didn't realize she was lying to you about her recovery, using you as free childcare while she... He trailed off, the betrayal clearly still raw for him as well. How's Ethan? I asked, the question I had been holding back for months, finally. Escaping. Tom's expression softened. He's good, growing fast. He misses you. He still looks around sometimes, like he's searching for someone who isn't there. The lump in my throat made it difficult to respond. I miss him too, more than I expected. He's with me most of the time now, the court granted. Me primary custody, with Julia having supervised visitation until she completes a parenting class. He hesitated, then added, You could see him if you want. He'd like that. So would I. The offer caught me off guard. I'd like that too, I admitted, surprised by my own eagerness, though I'm not sure how Julia would feel about it. Julia lost the right to have opinions about my parenting decisions when she abandoned her responsibilities, Tom said, an edge of bitterness in his voice. Anyway, it wouldn't be about her. It would be about a little boy seeing someone who cared for him when his own mother wouldn't. We made plans for me to visit that weekend, an arrangement that felt both strange and completely natural. As Tom rose to leave, he paused at the door. For what it's worth, Emma, your sister never deserved you. None of them did. After he left, I sat in the empty conference room, turning the check over in my hands. The full repayment of my financial losses should have felt like closure, but instead, it opened new questions. Where did I go from here? What did I want my relationship with Ethan to be? With Tom? With my parents and Julia? Could betrayal of this magnitude ever be forgiven or even understood? I didn't have answers yet, but for the first time in nearly a year, I felt the stirrings of genuine hope. Not the desperate optimism I had clung to during the darkest days of Julia's deception, but something more sustainable. A belief that whatever came next would be of my own choosing, built on the hard-won wisdom of having trusted too much and the surprising discovery that I could survive even this. That evening, as I deposited the check and updated my budget spreadsheet, I noticed something remarkable. With my debt cleared and my expenses reduced in my new, simpler life, I had more financial freedom than I'd experienced in years. The money that had once gone to supporting Julia's lifestyle and Ethan's needs was now mine again, to save or invest, or perhaps to use for a different kind of future than the one I had originally envisioned. I closed my laptop and walked to the window of my apartment, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, my family continued their lives, entangled in the consequences of their choices. And here I stood, separate but not diminished, ready to write the next chapter of my story with clearer eyes and a stronger heart. The weekend visit with Ethan was both joyful and painful. The moment he saw me, his face lit up with recognition, his little arms reaching for me with complete trust. I held him close, breathing in the familiar scent of him, marveling at how much he had grown in 6 months. Tom's new apartment was sparsely furnished but child-friendly, with toys scattered across the living room floor and colorful artwork taped to the refrigerator. Sorry about the mess, he said, clearing sippy cups from the coffee table. Single dad learning on the job. It looks perfect, I assured him, sitting on the floor with Ethan, who was eagerly showing me his collection of toy cars. The afternoon passed in a blur of playtime, snacks, and a nap, during which Tom and I sat at his kitchen table, sharing coffee and the strange intimacy of two people connected by circumstances neither had chosen. "How are your parents handling all this?" I asked, curious despite myself. Tom's expression darkened. "They've taken Julia's side, naturally. According to them, she's the victim of postpartum depression who's being punished for an illness she couldn't control. And they still believe that? Even after everything?" He shrugged. "People believe what they need to believe. Julia's their daughter. Admitting she manipulated everyone would mean admitting they raised someone capable of that." His insight made me wonder about my own parents and their role in the deception. Had they truly believed Julia needed the extended support? Or had they simply found it easier to sacrifice my needs than to confront hers? "What about your parents?" I asked. "After everything, what's your relationship with them like now?" I stared into my coffee, considering the question. Non-existent at the moment. They've reached out a few times, but their apologies always circle back to how Julia needed help, how they were just trying to support her. They don't seem to understand what they did to me. "And Julia?" Radio silence. I think she's embarrassed, or angry that I exposed her, or both. I traced the rim of my mug with my finger. The thing is, I'm not even sure I want a relationship with them anymore. I'm not sure I can trust them again. Tom nodded slowly. "Trust is like glass. Once it's shattered?" "Exactly." I looked up at him, struck by how different he seemed from the man I had known through Julia. More thoughtful, more perceptive. "So, we're both starting over. Looks that way." He glanced toward the bedroom where Ethan was sleeping. Some new beginnings are worth the pain that preceded them. After that first visit, a new routine developed. I would see Ethan most weekends, sometimes at Tom's place, sometimes taking him to the park or the children's museum. As he grew from infant to toddler, his personality emerged, stubborn like his mother, but with a kindness and curiosity that reminded me of Tom. My career slowly rebuilt itself as well. The smaller firm valued my experience, and within a year, I was heading their client acquisition team. The salary still didn't match what I'd been making before, but the work-life balance was better, and I found myself enjoying the collaborative atmosphere of a company not driven solely by profit margins. My parents continued their sporadic attempts at reconciliation, their messages growing increasingly desperate as they realized my absence from their lives might be permanent. I maintained polite but distant contact, unwilling to fully close the door, but equally unwilling to pretend their betrayal hadn't fundamentally altered our relationship. Julia, true to form, never apologized directly. Instead, she began a campaign of indirect communication, asking Tom to relay messages, sending generic birthday and holiday cards, occasionally posting nostalgic throwback photos on social media. Her marriage was over, her deception exposed, but she still couldn't bring herself to take full responsibility for her actions. 2 years after the confrontation that had changed everything, I received a job offer that seemed like cosmic irony, a marketing directorship in Colorado, at a firm even more prestigious than the one I had left behind. The salary was exceptional, the opportunity everything I had once dreamed of. I found myself at another crossroads, but this time with clearer vision. The professional ambition that had once defined me still existed, but it no longer eclipsed all other considerations. I had learned, through painful experience, that success without integrity, both my own and that of those around me, was hollow. I called Tom to discuss the offer, our friendship having evolved into something neither of us had anticipated, a partnership of sorts, centered around Ethan, but expanding to include genuine care for each other's well-being. "You should take it," he said without hesitation. "It's what you always wanted." "But Ethan," I began, the unspoken concern hanging between us. I'd missed so much of his life. "Colorado isn't Mars," Tom pointed out. "There are planes, video calls. We could make it work if you wanted to. The we lingered in the air, laden, with possibilities neither of us was quite ready to articulate. I'll think about it, I promised. That night, as I weighed the pros and cons of relocation, my phone rang with a number I hadn't saved but instantly recognized, my childhood home. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hello? Emma? My father's voice sounded older, frailer than I remembered. Please don't hang up. Your mother's in the hospital. My heart constricted despite the emotional distance I had maintained. What happened? Heart attack. Minor, they say, but she's asking for you. The old Emma would have dropped everything, rushed to the hospital, put everyone else's needs before her own. But I was no longer that person. I'll try to come tomorrow, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Text me the hospital information. After hanging up, I sat in the silence of my apartment, considering what this development meant for my decision about Colorado. Was it a sign that I should stay, that family obligations would always pull me back? Or was it further confirmation that I needed the distance, needed to prioritize my own future over the complicated tangle of family loyalty? Visited my mother the next day, finding her pale but alert in the hospital bed, my father hovering anxiously at her side. Julia sat in the corner, bouncing Ethan on her knee during what I assumed was one of her visitation days. The sight of my nephew with the mother who had once abandoned him stirred complex emotions. Ethan spotted me immediately, squirming to be set down. Ma, he called, toddling toward me with the unsteady determination of a 2-year-old. I scooped him up, pressing a kiss to his curls, acutely aware of Julia's eyes on us. You came, my mother said, reaching for my hand. I wasn't sure you would. Of course I came, I replied, allowing her to hold my hand briefly before stepping back. How are you feeling? The conversation that followed was stilted, years of unresolved tension creating an undercurrent that no one seemed willing to address directly. My father spoke too loudly, my mother too carefully, Julia hardly at all. Only Ethan, oblivious to the adult drama, behaved naturally, chattering about his toys and demanding I read him the book he had brought. As I prepared to leave, my mother called me back to her bedside. Emma, I know things have been difficult. But this, she gestured weakly at her hospital surroundings, makes you realize what's important. Family is important. Can't we put the past behind us? I studied her face, searching for genuine understanding rather than the convenient amnesia she seemed to be suggesting. The past happened, Mom. It shaped who I am now. I can't just pretend it didn't. But you can forgive, she pressed. For Ethan's sake, if nothing else. He should have his whole family around him. The mention of Ethan struck a nerve. Ethan has exactly the family he needs. People who are honest and reliable and put his well-being first. That's what I want for him, and it's what I want for myself, too. I left the hospital with a clarity I had been seeking. The Colorado offer represented more than a career opportunity. It was a chance to define my life on my own terms, to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or manipulation. 2 weeks later, I accepted the position. The company provided a relocation package, and I found myself packing up the apartment that had been my refuge during the darkest period of my life. Tom and Ethan helped on moving day, the 3 of us sharing pizza on the empty floor after the movers had taken the last of my furniture. I wish you weren't going, Ethan said, his lower lip trembling slightly. At 3, he was old enough to understand distance, but too young to comprehend the complexities of adult decisions. I'll visit often, I promised, pulling him onto my lap. And you and Daddy can come see me too. I'll have a special room just for you. Tom caught my eye over Ethan's head, a silent communication passing between us. We'll make it work, he said, echoing his words from months earlier, but with a new weight behind them. The night before my flight to Colorado, I did something I had been avoiding for 3 years. I invited Julia for coffee. She arrived at the cafe looking nervous, her once confident demeanor subdued. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, as she slid into the booth opposite me. "I wanted to clear the air before I leave." "You're really going through with it? Moving across the country?" There was a note of accusation in her voice, as if my departure were another betrayal rather than a consequence of her actions. "I am." I stirred my coffee, gathering my thoughts. "Julia, I didn't ask you here to rehash the past or to get an apology I don't think you're capable of giving. I asked you here to set boundaries for the future." She bristled visibly. "Boundaries?" "Yes. I'll be in Ethan's life as long as he and Tom want me there. That means I'll sometimes be at events where you are too. Birthdays, school functions, maybe holidays eventually. I want us to be civil for his sake." "Civil," she repeated flatly. "After everything we've been through together, that's what you want? Civility? What did you expect? That I'd forgive and forget? That we'd go back to being the sisters we were before you exploited my love for you and for Ethan?" Julia's eyes filled with tears that, for once, seemed genuine. "I never meant to hurt you, Emma. I was struggling, and then when things got better, it was so nice having help, having freedom again. I took advantage of a good situation." "A good situation for you," I corrected her. "A situation that cost me my career, my savings, and my trust in my family. And now you're getting it all back. The big job, the fresh start. You're the success story again." The familiar note of resentment crept into her voice, the subtle competition that had always defined our relationship. "This isn't about winning or losing, Julia. It's about choices and consequences. I made a choice to help you, and it had consequences I didn't anticipate. You made a choice to lie, and these are your consequences." I gestured between us, indicating the chasm that now existed where our sisterhood had once been. "So that's it? We're just done?" I considered her question seriously. "I don't know. Maybe someday things will be different, but right now I need to focus on building a life I can trust, with people I can trust. And you're not one of those people yet." We parted with an awkward hug, a gesture that felt more like closing a chapter than beginning a new one. As I watched my sister walk away, I was struck by the realization that I felt neither triumph nor bitterness, just a quiet certainty that I had finally stood up for myself in the way I had always deserved. Colorado welcomed me with mountains that reminded me daily of the climb I had made from the valley of betrayal to the peak of self-respect. The new job challenged and rewarded me, my colleagues quickly coming to value the perspective I brought from my unconventional career path. Tom and Ethan visited monthly, our relationship evolving into something that defied easy categorization. More than friends, not quite family in the traditional sense, but bound by a shared history and a mutual devotion to a child who connected us in ways neither had anticipated. My parents continued their cautious outreach, which I reciprocated with equally measured responses. We were finding our way toward a new kind of relationship, one based not on the roles we had always played, but on the adults we were becoming through the crucible of conflict and its aftermath. As for Julia, we maintained the civil distance I had requested, our interactions limited to brief exchanges at Ethan's birthday parties and the occasional group text about family matters. Whether our relationship would ever heal completely remained an open question, one that I no longer felt urgent about answering. 3 years into my Colorado life, as I stood on the balcony of my Mountain View apartment watching the sun set behind peaks still capped with spring snow, my phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "Ethan's school play is next month. He's a tree. Very important tree, apparently. Worth flying back for?" I smiled at the photo attached, Ethan in a homemade tree costume, grinning widely, missing his 2 front teeth. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, already mentally rearranging my calendar to accommodate the trip. As I set down my phone, I was struck by how far I had come from that moment when Mark's call about the Colorado promotion had slipped from my fingers. The path from there to here had been neither straight nor easy, but it had led me to a place of strength I might never have found otherwise. In choosing myself, finally fully, I had discovered that true generosity comes not from martyrdom, but from wholeness. By reclaiming my right to prioritize my own well-being, I had become more, not less, capable of authentic love and connection. The betrayal that had once defined my narrative had transformed into merely one chapter in a longer, richer story. A story that continued to unfold with possibilities I was now brave enough to embrace, on my own terms, in my own time, with my heart open but my boundaries firmly intact. As the last light faded from the sky, I made a silent promise to the woman I had become. I would never again confuse sacrifice with love or obligation with worthiness. The lessons had been hard won, but standing in the quiet certainty of my own value, I knew with absolute clarity that they had been worth the cost.